Hello, I'm Anna Maria Tremonti, and you're listening to The Current.
We've announced a couple of weeks ago a new compensation plan. If people ask for some money in the next 3, 5, 10 years, there'll be a cumulative amount of $100,000. Then we'll offer a maximum of $200,000 to move to another house. I think it's important. We cannot have every year compensation to solve problems, but only on a temporary basis. We really need to have incentives to move the people when it's happening every year or almost.
That is Quebec Premier François Legault speaking with reporters after touring communities under flood threat yesterday. Thousands of people have been forced from their homes as floodwaters continue to rise in Ottawa, Gatineau, and across western Quebec. Thousands more are preparing for the possibility of evacuation as local rivers swell to peak levels with more rain in the forecast. There are 5 major floods affecting 51 municipalities in Quebec right now. The province's plan to offer financial incentives to people who live in flood zones to move from those homes and settle elsewhere is one that may just appeal to the residents of Point Gatineau. It is a low-income neighborhood on the shores of the Gatineau River. It is bracing for what could be a repeat of devastating floods in 2017. At that time, muddy water surged through the community. It turned streets into canals, submerged cars, and inflicted damage on more than 100 properties. Jean-François Cousineau is the co-owner of one of those properties, a rooming house, and that's where we have reached him. Hello.
Hi, good morning.
What do you see out your window right now?
Right now I'm sitting on the front balcony, and I see the building is surrounded by about 3/4 of the water. I have a lot of sandbags installed. It's not surrounding the whole house, but it's surrounding where the water came up 2 years ago. As we speak, it's about 15, 20 feet from the sandbags, the water. Although last year, 2 years ago, there was no water that touched the foundation. It came from underground after rising up so high outside. So I have a pump installed in the basement, and I'm just anxiously waiting to see what happens. I heard it's going to go up again, and that's what I'm afraid most. I have people coming this morning to move 2 furnaces and 2 hot water heaters up on the main floor because it's been damaged 2 years ago, and we had to install brand new ones, which cost $11,000. So I have people coming this morning to bring them up on the main floor. And all my tenants are going to Red Cross this morning because there will be no more heat and hot water. And that's how it's going. As for me, I'm living some insecurities as to where I'm going to go after here, because I don't think I'll be able to stay here until the water comes down, and we'll see what happens after that.
How fast has the water been rising?
It came up a little bit since last night, but not that much. In the last couple of days, it's been quite stable there, and that's how it's going right now.
What are your neighbors saying? Are they in the same kind of situation as you?
Yes, everyone's in the same situation here. Some of them got protected. Some other people just said that just gave up. They just gave up. And they couldn't bear the thought of being flooded again, so they just gave up. Like my next-door neighbor abandoned her house, and she's living elsewhere. She comes once a while to check, but she left it behind there.
So you're hoping that the stuff you're doing will be able to save the house this time?
Save the house, but I don't believe I can live here anymore. I don't believe anyone will want to live here anymore after today, after 2019, because it happened 2 years ago, and it's happening again. Who knows if it's going to happen again? The probabilities are now much higher because it happened twice in 2 years, you know. You imagine trying to expect that and see that coming every year, every spring there? My body is not made for that.
That's a lot of anxiety, huh?
It is this is the most hardest feeling is anxiety, you know. Anxiety, fear, uncertainty, unknown, worry like crazy, and, a lot of sadness because it's total loss of control here.
So the Premier has said the province could help with moving costs to actually get you to relocate, you and others to relocate. Would you consider that?
100%, yes. As I said, I cannot believe I will be here next year at this time.
Where would you go?
anywhere away from the water. I just want a small place for me and my dog, and that's all I want because I have a job. I cannot work these days, but I have a job in Ottawa, and that's all I want is a place, quiet, rooming house. I'll have to abandon the project because this is going to cost us so much money. All I want is a small house or apartment with a fence yard for me and my dog, so I can live. I'm 54 years old, and I don't have that much left to go, but still a few, and that's all I want, away from the water.
Yeah. And so do you have any idea of, like, when you'd be able to do that?
First, I have to try to protect the building here in case it's being protected. I don't know. As I said, I'm going to be out, but in the meantime, it would be nice to live here until such thing can be done, because I don't think if we are lucky and the government helps us get out of here, I need a place to live in the meantime, and I don't want to let the whole house get destroyed like that. But if it's going to have to happen, it's going to have to happen.
So much uncertainty, huh?
Yes, exactly. That is the worst.
And what about the municipality? Has it been able to help you? Like you say, you have sandbags, so somebody came and put those in or helped you put those in?
I had volunteers, lots of volunteers, people I know and people I don't know. And they came here and helped us put the sandbags. I have some friends that helped me too. So I had a lot of help. I cannot complain about being left alone by anyone. I cannot say that.
But it's time to go.
Oh, as I said, twice in 2 years is too many. First time, I never lived that before. It was some kind of a shock. And it was very hard, but it is much harder now because I lived it 2 years ago. All those bad memories are coming back.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go. I know that you're watching that water now from the balcony, making sure. So I'll let you go. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me.
Okay. Thank you very much for putting me on air and let people know what's happening here.
Okay. You take care.
Okay. You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Jean-François Cousineau owns a rooming house. It was flooded in 2017. He joined us from his home in Pointe-Gatineau, Quebec. Well, as the waters rise again in Quebec, some communities have been working to prevent the kind of damage they saw from the flooding of 2017. Normand Marinacci is the mayor of l'Île Bizarre Saint-Geneviève, which is a Montreal borough.
We've decided after what happened in 2017 to pass a bylaw that there will be no construction in the zones at risk of flooding. It represents generally approximately the same zone that were flooded in 2017. The existing houses will remain there. They can do whatever they want, but we don't want new houses in those zones. Mainly because our planet is changing, and the climate changes might affect our rivers and flooding. We want to have a view for the future, a vision, so that we cannot in 20 years regret that we had given the permission to people to build in those zones.
Well, each community is finding its own lessons from the past and preparing for the future. Guy Pilon is the mayor of Vaudreuil-Dorion, and that's where we've reached him. Hello.
Bonjour, madame.
What is the situation like where you are now in your community?
Oh, everything is under control. The lake of Tremonti just rose 1 centimeter last night, so it's not bad. But in general, overall, everything is under control and no one have to be removed. And we took lesson from 2017, and it's happened that we took very, very good decision about how to react to this to the flood.
And so how does what you're seeing compare to the floods of 2017?
We are more prepared, so we put some a jersey, cement jersey along the Boulevard Saint-Charles. We put it on the residential area, and we block the water before it goes to the certain houses, and it changed completely the work we have to do. 2 years ago, we were going house by house when the water was going up, and we had intervention house by house. Now we block complete sector of the town, and it's happened to be fantastic. And we can reopen the school. Nothing have been closed, and I know we did the right thing by using other ways to prevent flooding. So
you've got some cement barriers. You also have done a lot of sandbagging, have you not?
Yes, we have sandbag, but that's the main thing. 2 years ago, we asked volunteers to do sandbag. This year, we didn't ask any volunteer for the town. We have a sandbag, but special sandbag delivered directly to the town, and but directly on a point to the citizen. And it was very, very efficient, very, very productive, and it prevent us to have to ask hundreds and hundreds of volunteers every day to bring sandbag. So the result at the end of the flood would be analyzed, but it was one of the best decisions we took to have sandbag already made and delivered by a company.
Oh, okay, so you didn't have a bunch of people trying to fill them with sand and then put them up. Right, you saved a lot of time. What was it expensive to do that?
Oh, it's $2 a bag. So when you count the fact, when you do your own sandbag, you have to buy the bag, the tie wrap. You have to bring people. You have to buy the sand, of course. But the main issue is when every sandbag have to be delivered by hand and 1 by 1 or 20 by 20. But there's a lot of manutention. The way we work this year is very, very easy. All 50 sandbags are already made they are on a wooden pallet, and they are delivered directly to the place. So a lot less manutention, and the reaction is instantly. Someone call, we go check, and then the sandbag can be there 15 minutes after. So, and we have another group of our firefighter and blue collars who are there to help people to put the sandbags too. So, it's a huge difference, and we live both way to do. And of course, this year it's fantastic. The results are great, and the sandbag who have been delivered are more made to be piled up. The other one sandbag was more round.
Right.
It was difficult to put three steps. With those sandbags, it's fantastic, and everyone is happy about it.
Some specialists say that people who live close to rivers like these that keep rising in the spring need to be moved to avoid the costs associated with flooding. What do you say to that?
What I say, it's not everyone. Okay, there's a difference between having a bit of water on your land, and you can keep the water out with some pump, and having 3 or 4 feet of water in your house. That's the decision the towns have to take with the citizen. Like I think Mr. Legault announced for around $200,000 for house who want to be demolished and moved, but maybe if the same amount of money is given to the citizen once in his life to make modification to his house, maybe people can still live there, but always depending how much water go every year or every 2 years on his land. But it's very hard to tell someone who live all his life there. We have some owners who are the third generation, and asking them to leave the place. It's waterfront. It's beautiful, but they have to understand it cannot be done more than once in their life. After that, if they decide to go there, to stay there, they have to live with the consequence. And of course, the government and the town cannot take care of them every 2 years.
But let me ask you, how realistic is that? That you would then, if somebody took that one-time deal and then they faced even higher floodwaters one year, that the community wouldn't help them, or they'd be on the hook for everything? Is that realistic?
Yes, it is realistic. People have to take their own decision, and at the end of the day, if they decide to build, like I said, sometimes it's only a few inches. Sometimes maybe a foot, but sometimes it's 3 or 4 feet, okay? We don't have that reality on our town. It's a bit different than elsewhere in the province of Quebec. You cannot do that at Nicolette or maybe it's a lot more water than we had, but we took some protection, and I'm very, very confident if people, new construction or even old construction are made to be protect from water, and I have example in my town, they can live those situations. And at the end of the day, they will be able to live where they live for all their life. But it's always depend, Madame, how many water goes there every year or every 2 years or every 3 years. And over a certain amount of money, over a certain level, even the construction cannot be made to protect. So everyone have to take a decision somewhere, but let people take their own decision. And if you want to leave, take the money and leave, and maybe it's the best thing. But if you feel you can stay there and build something to protect yourself and live with the consequences, that's the main issue. Maybe you can have the choice too.
Okay, well, Mayor Pilon, we'll leave it there. Thank you for your thoughts today.
My pleasure, madame.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That is Guy Pilon. He is the mayor of Vaudreuil-Dorion, and that is where we reached him. Well, the waters are high along the St. John River in neighboring New Brunswick as well. Parts of Fredericton are submerged in high water. Officials say those waters around Fredericton have peaked and should start to decline in the coming days. But there are communities south of Fredericton that are still being affected as well. And, of course, Fredericton's still facing it. My next guest wants to put an end to the vicious cycle of flooding that so many people are facing. He says that in order to do that, a major tide needs to turn. Glenn McGillivray is the managing director for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, which is a nonprofit research group focusing on disaster prevention, research, and communication. And he's in our Toronto studio. Hi.
Good morning.
So as you listen to my last two guests, what are you thinking?
Well, you and I sat here together on May 15th, 2017, talking about the same things, and we talked about some of the things that should be done. And I think we're finally starting to see action in the right direction, some movement in the right direction. We're seeing governments kind of pulling back on this whole disaster assistance question and whether that pit should be bottomless. And we're hearing governments talking about buyouts. And those are the two things we discussed 2 years ago, and it's good to see some movement in that direction. Not sure if it's enough, and I'm a little concerned that the buyout is voluntary and not mandatory. But certainly I think the discussion's going in the right way finally.
And so let's talk a little bit more about buyouts, because this is where flooding is most acute as we speak today. It happens in other parts of the country. Yeah. Is it enough money? Can you leave people to say we're going to buy you out, or if you stay there, you're stuck with dealing with the flood on your own? How realistic is that?
Well, I think as we discussed a couple of years ago, it's not a popular thing to do. People aren't clamoring for it, although sometimes we do have people asking for it. We had it in Sydney, Nova Scotia, people asking to be bought out, and they were. But it's not popular. But I think as long as people are given a fair market value for the property, that's key. But this whole voluntary thing, that's really a sticking point. It happened in southern Alberta after the 2013 floods. The buyout programs were voluntary, and they were largely a failure. I don't think you can leave it to people to always make the right decision. People move to those places for a reason. You often hear, well, it's beautiful and that sort of thing.
Or it's been in the family for generations.
But let me
ask you, what responsibility do municipalities and provinces have in zoning? We used to hear, are we still hearing, where are the floodplain maps? Right. Are they good? Are they up to date?
It's a real dog's breakfast right across the country. You have places where the floodplain maps are up to date using technology, incorporating climate change into them, and you have places where they're ancient. Quebec historically hasn't been great. Some of their maps are quite old. They're digitized, but they're just digital copies of paper maps. And I understand they're finally coming around there as well to get some better mapping. But a lot of the risks that we're seeing right now, a lot of the problems we're seeing right now is legacy risk that's been around for a long, long time. So I saw a gentleman on the National last night whose grandfather bought the home in 1949, and he got it for a song because it flooded all the time. So that's the thing. A lot of these places are decades old. The buildings have been there for quite some time. But the first thing we have to do is stop creating new risk, and we have to stop new construction in these places. And that's job number one, I think. How
much of a role is climate change playing in the floods we're seeing?
I'm really careful to say whether it's playing a role or not. It's very difficult to say. What we have to understand here is that the floodplain is flooding right now, and the floodplain is part of the river. And it floods. That's what it does.
That's why they call it a floodplain.
That's why they call it a floodplain. And the boreal forest burns and the floodplain floods. And that's the bottom line. And so we shouldn't get too excited, I think, about it. It happens often. It happened in 2017. It's the spring freshet melting. Now, we got some heavy rainfall. That could certainly have some climate change in there. I don't know. But we do have to understand that, if we make this thing exceptional, if we describe it as being rare and then we're not going to treat it with the gravity it needs. This is going to happen. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen again, and it's going to happen again. And we have to get a hold on it now.
We heard the mayor talk about cement barriers. Are there other ways to mitigate the flooding?
Yeah, I understand the need for temporary barriers, but they are stopgap measures. They are temporary. They're not sustainable. You can look at things like raising properties, and that's being done in Houston right now because of Hurricane Harvey a couple of years ago. It's being done in the New York area and places like that after Superstorm Sandy in 2012, I think it was. That's expensive, very disruptive. You have to find the right contractors to do it. And the buildings are still in the floodplain. That doesn't change anything. It kind of reduces the property damage, but it doesn't change things like, contaminated waters rushing through a community and stuff like that. There are ways of building structures to make them wet so that the basement will flood, but it will dry out and you can move on again. These are all different things that can be looked at, but really at ICLR, we believe that we really have to get people off the floodplain, period, end. And the other measures are, they deserve a discussion, but they're not always the best way to go, I think.
Is it possible to get homes, like when you go to a builder, are there houses now that are more flood-proof, even if you're not right on a floodplain? Because there are other ways that communities flood, right, in terms of
I think right off the shelf, off the rack, I don't think there are. I think you'd have to speak to your builder, come up with a custom solution. You really have to look at height of the basement, whether you even should have a basement to begin with. And
so this is the kind of thing that has to change as well, then?
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you see that happening enough in this country?
No, absolutely not. As long as the government is writing the check and bailing people out, that introduces moral hazard, and people kind of, they just rebuild in place and go on with their life. And we're seeing it right now. Again, we sat here 2 years ago talking about the same stuff, and the same people are flooding. And in 2 years, it'll happen again, and it'll happen again, and it'll happen again.
So there are buyouts that have occurred elsewhere?
Right. Yeah. We look at 1954, the Toronto area after Hurricane Hazel, as one of the model buyout programs we had in this country. So, Hurricane Hazel hit Toronto. Several people died. A lot of neighborhoods were wiped out. The province came in, bought out quite a few homeowners in the Humber River Valley area and some other places in Toronto, turned that property into parkland. That parkland floods all the time, but there's no property damage. There's no loss of life. That was a mandatory buyout, and that's key. It was mandatory. And we still look at it today as the way to go. It was very well done. Again, I mentioned Southern Alberta 2013. That was a voluntary buyout. It was a failure, an abject failure. And so now we have these neighborhoods that are pockmarked with homes that were either abandoned or moved away, and you have people that stayed. And so that's not a good solution either. So as tough as the mandatory buyout idea is, I think it's the way to go, particularly in the very high-risk areas. And we have to give it more heed, I think.
Okay, and so do you see municipalities getting better at this in terms of who they're hiring to work on these issues, how they actually think about building a community?
I'm encouraged in some ways. We saw a really good buyout in Sydney, Nova Scotia after some Thanksgiving Day flooding in 2016, I think it was. 18 homes were bought out in a high-risk area. In many cases, homeowners even asked for it, but they did that. That was a great way to go. I think re-flood mapping areas, incorporating climate change in the flood maps, that's all encouraging. Having climate change adaptation staff on municipal employees and coming up with plans and things of that nature is very encouraging.
So it doesn't have to be this way, but we need a bureaucracy to actually look after it.
We do, and we're getting there. We really are, and there are places that are leading and places that are not, but we're getting there.
Okay, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Glenn McGillivray, Managing Director for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, with me in our Toronto studio. If you're worried about flooding in your community, we want to hear from you. Tweet us at The Current CBC. Go to our website, cbc.ca/thecurrent, and click on the contact link.